Good afternoon and welcome to City News International. I'm Miriam Smorin.
And I'm Amy Brooks.
Summertime has finally arrived here in London and tourism season is in full swing. In today's special edition of City News International, we will be taking a look at all the things that makes the city great.
That's right. From the people who make London one of the most diverse cities in the world, to politics, and even some of London's best kept secrets, we'll be taking you on a tour of the City of London.
But first, here's a look at the top stories around the world with our correspondent, Pierre Bertrand. Pierre?
Thank you, Miriam. The United States reached a political milestone last night. Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton has become the first woman in American political history to receive her party's nomination. Clinton will be officially nominated during the Democratic National Convention in June, but her rival Bernie Sanders vows to keep campaigning until the very end. Turkish police officers are reeling for the second time this week from yet another car bomb attack. This time, the police headquarters of Midyat, a town near Turkey's southeastern border with Syria, was the target. The Turkish Prime Minister has stated that it is the Kurdish Workers' Party, or the PKK, that are behind the attack. At least one police officer and 2 civilians have been killed, and more than 20 others are in hospital. This attack follows yesterday's early morning car bomb explosion in Istanbul, which killed 7 officers and 4 civilians. 4 people have been detained in connection with yesterday's attack. The United Nations today accused the Eritrean government of making little to no progress in reversing human rights violations, which were identified last year. The UN recommended the country be referred to the International Criminal Court for what they say are systematic and widespread abuses, which include enslavement and torture. Human rights groups accuse President Isaias Afwerki of authoritarian repression. He has been in power in Eritrea since 1991, and it is claimed he drove almost 50,000 people from the country in 2015. And finally, British Prime Minister David Cameron took to Twitter, urging Britons unable to register for the EU referendum vote on the 23rd to keep registering. Yesterday was the deadline to register for the vote, but an online glitch yesterday locked out thousands of would-be voters from entering their names in the registries. Cameron said urgent discussions are underway to extend the registration deadline. The government blames the glitch, which caused the online registration system to crash on high demand and internet traffic. The system is back online, though, and to register to vote, you can visit www.gov.uk/register-to-vote. Amy, back to you.
With only 15 days to go until Britons head to the polls to vote in the EU referendum, the Leave and Stay campaigns are ramping up their efforts to bring voters to their side. Last night, Prime Minister David Cameron and UKIP leader Nigel Farage were quizzed by audiences about their positions on UK's future in or out of the EU. Mr. Cameron continued to make his economic plea.
Well, we can certainly survive outside the EU. I think the question for us is, how do we thrive? How do we do best? How do we create opportunities and jobs and chances for our children and our grandchildren? That, to me, is what this debate is about. And I think what's so unique about it is the extraordinary consensus. 9 out of 10 economists, the Governor of the Bank of England, the International Monetary Fund, all saying that they believe we would suffer a hit to our economy, a hit to jobs. And what that means for people is lower living standards, potentially lower wages, higher prices in our shops, and yes, potentially a...
But Mr. Farage's arguments centered on immigration.
But what exactly...
This should be a British passport. It says European Union on it, all right? I think, to make this country safer, we need to get back British passports so that we can check anybody else coming in to this country. I really do.
But what exactly is a migrant? And is the UK truly struggling to stay afloat under an influx of immigrants? Well, according to the Migration Observatory at the University of Oxford, there are more than 8 million migrants here in the UK, and over a third of them live in London.
But, interestingly, only 13,000 refugees were granted asylum in the UK last year, bringing the total number of asylum seekers in the country to just 100,000.
Our migration correspondent, Haley Thomas, sat down with the people at the heart of the UK migration story who now call London their home.
Nefe Atomi was born in America, spent the majority of her life in Nigeria, and has spent the past 9 years in the UK. She moved to Britain to finish her education and currently lives and works in London. Although her background is a global fusion, she easily defines her identity.
I'm more Nigerian than the other parts of me, but I'm incomplete without the part of the US and the UK. in me.
The politics of immigration in the UK often paint migrants in a negative light, as criminals or parasites stealing local jobs. But Nefe feels strongly about her place as a positive citizen in the London community.
Immigrants have a lot to bring to the table, and I feel like the fact that that's just being ignored because of a few petty instances, I don't know, I think it's just a huge ego thing that they need to get over, because you're hurting people's livelihoods because of something that means nothing.
Desi Rodegari from northern Italy is a manager at Jimmy and the Bee, a local coffee shop in Islington. Over the past 6 years, she has built her professional and social life in the UK from the ground up.
Well, if you think about it, all of my work life actually started here. I don't really have much connection apart from my family. Don't have a lot of friends in Italy either. I actually have more friends here than in Italy.
If Britons vote to exit the EU, people like Desi, who consider the UK home, may be forced to leave. For her, going back to Italy means she would have to completely start over.
I live here. I'm very happy with it. I think going back to Italy would be a huge step back. And I'm not particularly proud of my country either, and that's why I don't want to go back.
Hairdresser Janki Patel is of Indian descent and was born and raised in Kenya. She loves living in London and feels fulfilled through the path her career has taken. So she doesn't understand why some Brits won't welcome the current wandering generation.
Working in London is probably one of the better experiences in my work career, and I think I look forward to working every day.
For Janki, being a migrant isn't just living in a different place, but it's an ongoing struggle to feel accepted and embraced by the community.
It's sad. It's really sad if you don't embrace the world for what it is now. We're in a new generation. This is the world today. You have to change your mindset.
And Janki has one last thought, which goes to show that these migrants are not just passive residents, but active and concerned citizens.
Our generation should go out there, have a legitimate vote instead of keeping up with the Kardashians, keep up with what's going on in our world right now. You know, this is us. This is it.
Haley Thomas, City News International.
We have Haley Thomas with us now to talk a little bit more about what we just heard. Hi, Haley.
Hi, Amy. Hi, Miriam.
Hi. So what struck you most while reporting this story?
I think what was interesting for us about this story is that people that we talk to, they're migrants, they come from all over the world, they have different identities, but they still call London and the UK home. And for us, a big thing was the fact that they're really frustrated about the current climate in the UK and kind of the sense of anti-immigration flooding through with the upcoming EU referendum vote. So that's really what stuck with us, but overall, they're still really hopeful about the future in the UK.
What countries are these migrants coming from?
Well, from the data we've gathered from the Observatory of Migration at Oxford University, they say that actually less than 1% of the people in Britain are refugees and asylum seekers. Majority of them are migrants from India, Pakistan, Poland, Nigeria, and they've really integrated with themselves into this community. And I think what's really important to take away from this story is the fact that all their stories are very different. They range from positivities, and at the end of the day, they're all very important when you're talking about migration in the UK.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Now to East London, where the British Bengali community is currently at odds over a statue. The statue was built to honor the first Prime Minister of Bangladesh, but it has drawn criticism from some in the community who say he repressed minorities during his time in office. Nevertheless, the owner hopes the monument will attract the attention of passers-by and maybe even a visit from the current Prime Minister of Bangladesh. Our correspondent Francesca Della Penna has more.
Whitechapel in East London is home to the largest British Bangladeshi community in the UK. Here on Sydney Street, Afzal Khan decided to be the statue of the first Prime Minister, Sheikh Mujib Rahman, in his front garden. He believes it will become a landmark not only for the Bangladeshi community living in London, but for everyone.
Everyone's encouraging me to do it, and I did it. It is the great achievement for the Bangladeshi community, a great achievement for my local community, special Stepney Green, Whitechapel. The Bangladeshi people, wherever they live, is open for everyone. They can come in and they show their respect to the father of the nation.
But one of his neighbors, David Rees, shared some worries over unwanted attention that the statue could attract.
Yeah, it's quite intriguing when you see the camaraderie from a distance and you see Italians, Greeks, Welsh, English, all coming together to support one goal, which is one eccentric man's idea to put a sculpture in his garden to represent the founding of Bangladesh. But there are consequences to that because local Pakistanis live in this local community. They probably won't see the same positive move as what Mr. Khan does.
There is also opposition within the Bangladeshi community. Bangladesh Nationalist Party, at the protest against the current government, dismisses Sheikh Mujib as an illegitimate, self-appointed leader for silencing minorities during Bangladesh Liberation War in 1971.
He is not father of the nation. He is a traitor. He is a traitor because he shake hand with the Pakistan.
We didn't call him a father of nation because his party called him father of nation. Whole nation never gave him the title of father of nation.
Despite the criticism, Afzal Khan has great expectations.
I believe the Prime Minister of Bangladesh or father of the nations, one of the daughter or great granddaughter, they will come and they open it. I hope it.
This morning, our correspondent Francesca Della Penna went back to East London to find out whether the community's reaction to the statue has changed.
3 weeks post-construction, still the tarpaulin mysteriously remain on the statue, waiting for the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina. Currently, this blue oddity leaves the locals curious and confused about what's inside it. Historically, Bangladeshi community has been meeting around the statue for the Bengali language movement in a nearby park. Would this statue of Sheikh Mujib Rahman become another place for political unrest? Well, if this is how the future unfolds, it will be intriguing to see how supportive the locals would be then. From Whitechapel for City News, Francesca Della Penna.
Thank you, Francesca. BHS executives were brought before Parliament today to testify about the collapse of the home goods superstore. Our correspondent, Magna Corno, went to Westminster and has this report.
Today, BHS head of retail Dominic Chappell and CEO Darren Top were put on the spot by MPs and members of the Pension and Business Select Committee. Parliament wanted to investigate the company's collapse and how Mr. Chappell was able to persuade the company's former head, Sir Philip Green, that he was capable of directing BHS. They also investigated claims that Dominic Chappell was abusive and even threatened to kill members of the executive team.
I said to him, that's theft. Now, if I take out all the expletives, he basically said, do not kick off about this, Darren. I've had enough of you telling me what to do over the last few months. It's my business. I can do what I want. And if you kick off about it, I'm going to come down there and kill you.
Ultimately, today's exchange was rather tense and offered insight into the workplace culture of BHS and perhaps why the company collapsed. This is Magda Corno from City of Westminster.
Finding affordable housing is a constant struggle here in London, and high rent is making it difficult for Londoners to find a place to live, on land at least.
To offset costs, some have decided to move to the canals, but what promised to be a simple life on the Thames is actually becoming harder for boaters who say they are struggling to cope with the guidelines set by authorities.
Now, boat dwellers in the city are locked in a battle against what they say are unfair mooring laws. Our reporter Paloma de Salas brings us more.
Marcus Trower began living in London's waters a few years ago when he inherited his boat from his mother. He is a continuous cruiser, which means he has to move every 14 days. But like Marcus, many other boaters are accusing the Canal and River Trust of trying to expel them from the water by not telling them how far they have to travel.
I'm willing to move 14 days, and I think generally it's a good thing. But they are saying that we must do a certain distance a year without saying what the distance is. They're saying that we need to do a certain pattern of movement without telling us what the pattern of movement is.
Marcus's neighbours at Tottenham Hale Canal, some of them continuous cruisers for decades, are astonished by the lack of clarity from the Trust.
They won't define what the movement parameters are, and then they penalise you for not understanding what they want, which is ridiculous.
They don't know what they want.
I mean, it can't. This is not the real world, is it?
We don't know what we want, but we want it now.
Now, do it. Do it, whatever it is.
The Canal and River Trust, however, says they are just asking boaters to follow the rules.
We welcome continuous cruises. It's a really fantastic way of life, but we're just asking people to stick to the responsibilities that they did sign up for.
But the question here is, how far is far enough? The distance that continuous cruisers have to move every fortnight is not specified in any legislation. Boaters are asked to act with good faith, moving from one place to another, with the responsibility of satisfying the Trust's requirements. Not complying with these guidelines can mean a fine or even the destruction of the boat. As the number of continuous cruisers has increased 150% since 2011, the Trust says it's just a question of reinforcement.
Because it's got so busy in London over the past few years, we've had to take a look at how we manage the water space in the area. Now, we haven't changed any rules and prices haven't gone up, nothing like that. But what we are doing is being more proactive in enforcing our existing rules, which means we're making sure that people are moving as they're meant to move.
They argued this in 2010, they argued this in 2003, they argued this in 1991. They always argued this. There's too many of us and they must clear us.
Continuous cruises are set to fight for clearer legislation. Paloma de Salas for City News International.
And now for a look at today's local headlines.
Yesterday's heavy rains wreaked havoc on London streets. Builder Billy Miles smashed a Mercedes car window with a brick in order to save driver Graham Price, who was trapped inside after the vehicle submerged underwater in South London.
Price says the water knocked out his engine and electronics, and his doors were forced shut by the pressure of the rising flood. Forecasters estimated some 1.6 inches of rain fell in just an hour, where the average rainfall in South London for the whole of June is just 1.9 inches.
Transport for London Commissioner Mike Brown said a public transport fares freeze will be introduced until May 2020, backed by the Mayor of London.
Also in transport news, travelers are choosing to ignore pleas of the latest addition to the Holborn station, a singing hologram. The spectacle encourages journey makers to stand side by side on the escalator by singing the hits "I'm Still Standing" and "Stand By Me." But passengers traveling through the station seem to prefer the tradition of standing on the right and walking on the left. Transport for London hopes that standing on both sides of the escalators will make for a smoother journey through London's busy stations.
And finally, tourists are in for an eyeful this weekend as the annual World Naked Bike Run comes to London. Hundreds will be riding fully nude in order to protest car culture and an oil dependency. With 6 start points around the capital, riders will pedal past major landmarks including Big Ben and Piccadilly Circus. In previous years, crowds of riders have turned heads as they traveled around the city. The organizers have instructed the cyclists not to undress until just before the protest, as it'll undermine their relationship with the authorities.
And now to Mia Alberti, who will help fill your weekend with the latest in entertainment around town. Mia?
Hi Amy, for sure you won't be stuck at home. This weekend is time to celebrate not only the summer weather, but also the 10-year anniversary of the Field Day Festival, which happens every year in Victoria Park. This year's edition promises nothing less than James Blake, PJ Harvey, Youth Lagoon and Astronomy as the main headlines. More than 200 performances from artists from all over the world will be taking place in 9 stages throughout the weekend. As usual, besides the music, festival goers can also participate in a number of events like the famous eating competition or the village fete. The London International Festival of Theatre is exploding with amazing and original performances, installations and new forms of theatre. Throughout the capital, concert halls, museums and theatres are showing plays and pieces from the UK, Argentina, United States, Belgium or the Middle East. One of the feature shows is Stella, a play inspired by the true story of Mr. Ernest Bolton, and Transvestites from the Victorian times, On the Move, playing in several venues, is also worth checking. This set of performances focus on the migration crisis in Europe. And for a more affordable, but just as much cultural approach to the weekend, picture how cinema is celebrating its first anniversary by offering screenings for just £1. During All Day Friday, the West End Cinema will show the newest movie titles like Alice Through the Looking Glass, but also some classic reels such as Aliens, Cinderella or Pulp Fiction. So be sure not to miss it. And now we take a look at what to drink. Whether it's Plymouth, Old Town or London Dry, people around the globe are stocking up for World Gin Day this Saturday. London has had its own relationship with gin, and it's more sordid than you might think. Our reporter Patrick Hahn went to some local distilleries to learn more about the spirit, and it's a complicated history.
Gin is London's drink and it's booming. The number of distilleries in Britain has doubled in the past year alone. But this isn't the first gin craze. In the 1700s, gin's popularity soared, not as a leisure drink, but as a safer alternative to water, which carried disease. But back then, gin was associated with poverty, drunkenness and death, called mother's ruin, among other things.
The word gin comes from the fact that they say that everyone was too drunk in the early 1700s to be able to say your neighbour properly, so they just slurred it and it sounded like gin. The early sort of gin made in London were in an era called the gin craze, sort of 1710 to 1757, where production and consumption just absolutely boomed here.
It was, in a way, the crack cocaine of its time. The London Dry style of gin was developed in response to a distillation process that used poor quality alcohol and left people sick or dead.
Gin's history is quite fun to talk about, but it does revolve around death quite a lot, so you've got to be in the right mood for it. After everyone was dying in the 1700s, people started to realise they needed to produce a better standard of alcohol. And so in 1832, when the column still was invented and allows us to purify our alcohol, produce a cleaner, safer product, people started producing these really unsweetened gins.
So what then explains gin's reversal of fortune?
So I guess there's been this huge resurgence and interest in gin. It isn't just a drink that you know, associate with, your granny's drinks cabinet, kind of nicking it off your parents. It actually becomes something that people really appreciate. People kind of are far more interested in kind of the nuances of flavour profiles and different gins.
So wherever you are on World Gin Day, pick up a glass of Mother's Ruin, London's preferred drink. For City News International, this is Patrick Hahn.
And London's favourite wizard is back and all grown up. Hundreds of lucky Harry Potter fans scored the hottest tickets in town to the first night of previews for the new play, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. Our resident Potter fanatic, Chelsea Bailey, went down to the Palace Theatre to experience the magic.
Come on guys, we're going back to Hogwarts. Standing outside of the Palace Theatre, home of the new play, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child by J.K. Rowling, Jack Thorne, and John Tiffany. Harry Potter's latest adventure is being a father of 3 and working at the Ministry of Magic, but his best friends Ron and Hermione are still by his side. The Potter's youngest son, Albus, is off to Hogwarts for the first time, where he struggles with his father's legacy and his own inner darkness. The role of Albus will be played by newcomer Sam Clement, while theater veteran Jamie Parker will play Harry. Actors Paul Thorney and Noma Dumezweni play Ron and Hermione. That's pretty much all we know about the play, because Rowling and her co-authors wanted to keep the secrets. She even started a hashtag campaign.
This will be such an incredible theatrical experience that I'd love us to be able to surprise people and move people in the natural way that a story should surprise and move people.
I'm standing here with director and co-author John Tiffany here at the premiere of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, or rather the previews. So Mr. Tiffany, what are you excited about?
I'm excited about all these Harry Potter fans seeing the next part of the story, the 8th story, We pick up where the last book, where Deathly Hallows left off, and we go forward. And there are some old characters, there are some new characters, and clearly everybody's very excited.
I have to admit, I was more than a little excited myself, and I wasn't alone.
Anything. I mean, we don't know what actually, the whole thing what it's about, so I'm just looking forward to discovering Harry Potter again, basically. So yeah, very excited.
I think it's a unique story because we're both 24 and kind of grew up with the series. So hearing, the 19 years later chapters is like another part of my childhood coming back to life. It's great.
For City News International, this is Chelsea Bailey.
London is a city full of surprises, and there's so much more to see after Big Ben and London Bridge. Today we're exploring some of the unknown treasures in secret London.
We'll start with a new sport emerging in London this month, urban axe throwing. Thomas Triebel went to Whitechapel to report on the Canadian-born ancestral practice.
You're stressed from work but can't be bothered to jog or to go to the gym? Well, what about throwing some axes? The Whistle Punks Urban Axe Throwing has opened in Whitechapel to allow you to take your stress out on wooden targets. The club opened less than a month ago and it's already a hit, and demand has been growing. From office groups to birthday parties, everyone is invited to try their hand at shredding the targets, as long as you're 18 and sober.
So we've been really surprised by the range, by the spectrum of people who come. Some people who just want to try it out because they can't throw an axe into a target at home, and other people because they just want something different to do after work. So it's we haven't got one type so far, so it's quite nice that we meet a really broad range of people who come and play here.
Competitive axe throwing started in Canada more than 10 years ago, but it's only recently made the jump across the pond. Participants say it's a funny group activity that's stress-relieving and addictive.
I've released a lot of pressure from work, yeah. I've never chucked an axe before in my life, but now I think I'm going to be doing it more and more because the tension you release, it's amazing.
Well, we are with colleagues and we saw that on the internet and we thought it would be, kind of fun to do this. We've never seen that before, so yeah, we thought it would be fun to do it all together as a team. So
the aim of urban axe throwing is to convert an outdoor solo sport to a fun communal activity where people can bond over extreme competition.
We try and make it as easy as possible for people by teaching them, coaching them, giving them technique tips all the way through, and so pretty much everyone gets it and ends up having a good time. Even if they're not getting bullseyes every time, it's just really satisfying when it does just even stick in the wood in the target. It's a really satisfying sound and feeling.
Thomas Triebel for City News International.
Now we go back to Pierre Bertrand for a quick update on the headlines.
Thank you, Amy. In the United States, Hillary Clinton has just won the California primary, achieving in the process the Democratic Party's de facto presidential nomination. She is the first female politician to lead a political party in U.S. history. The Kurdistan Workers' Party, It is the Turkish Prime Minister that is accusing the Turkish Workers' Party, or the PKK, for carrying out a bomb attack on a police station in eastern Turkey. It is the second car bomb in 2 days targeting Turkish police. The United Nations recommended that human rights abuses by Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki be referred to the International Criminal Court. And finally, David Cameron took to Twitter urging UK voters to keep registering ahead of the June 23rd referendum vote. The Electoral Commission is in urgent discussions to extend the registration deadline after a glitch yesterday evening caused the online portal to crash hours before the deadline.
I'm afraid it's time for us to go. However, we hope you enjoyed the London special.
Remember, you can follow us on our Facebook page, City News International, and our Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat accounts. You can also catch the stories that you missed at citynews.atavis.com. I'm Amy Brooks.
And I'm Marian Samorin, and this is City News International London Special. Have a good day.